engineers started towing vehicles, and they found that legally a car that was parked in the law of New York, a car that was parked illegally could be towed to another legal spot. So they had a policy, and it was a very cruel policy, of towing all the vehicles from near the UN to the kind of docks all the way on the west side of the island, which now is all fancy and developed. At the time was like this like very decrepit area, and diplomats got very upset and they kind of backed off. So there were these earlier attempts, but they kept backing off until 2002. So it's been a huge issue, and diplomats accounted for like a huge share of parking tickets in New York. I mean, it was until this change. So how does it work? How does diplomatic immunity work? This is not just a U.S. issue; it's an international convention going back millennia. I mean, going back to ancient history where there were norms about not abusing the envoys or the ambassadors of other kingdoms, not holding them hostage, not doing other things, and it was all based on reciprocity. We're going to exchange ambassadors at a certain time so that we basically are holding hostages for each other, but that prevents either of us from abusing the other's ambassador. So this is an ancient precedent, and it's actually very kind of extreme. So in very few cases is diplomatic immunity waived by the home country. There are murder cases, all kinds of very extreme cases where diplomats commit serious crimes, and they're just withdrawn and taken home. It's extremely rare for the diplomat's country to say, we're going to waive your diplomatic immunity and let the local country try you, because I think countries are afraid of weakening the norm of diplomatic immunity, which benefits their own diplomats, basically. So this is, so again, you could be expelled, they could waive immunity, but basically it never happens. There's some interesting cases, not just in New York. There was an interesting case in London, and again, these are kind of worldwide problems, any place where there's a lot of diplomats. In 2003, I think in London, they put in place a congestion charge for vehicles driving into central London, and the U.S. embassy actually refused to pay because they said that the congestion charge was a tax on their diplomats, and they also didn't want to be taxed and whatnot. So there were a number of other countries that were refusing to pay, and eventually they started paying. But they didn't have to. Diplomats didn't have to pay that congestion charge, just like they didn't have to pay parking tickets in New York. So getting into sort of how we disentangle things with this setting, imagine what we were talking about before, that you might enforce good behavior or control corruption either through good social norms, meaning if I'm in a government agency and I'm corrupt, my peers, my boss, the people who work with me will really pressure me and not to do it. They'll sort of denounce me. They'll get me in trouble. So my colleagues will pressure me, but there'll also be some, in many cases, legal enforcement they can sort of draw on. So we might think of countries that have good anti-corruption norms and good laws, and then other settings where there's weak norms against corruption. It's almost expected you take bribes. It's just part of a corruption system, and there's sort of minimal legal enforcement. And you can see why both of these are equilibria. If you're either here or here, there's this constant clashing between the two. So just to be concrete and to talk about two countries we'll see on one of the figures, imagine the high norm, high enforcement country is Norway, and the low norm, low enforcement country is Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that's famously corrupt. Nigerians write about it and talk about it endlessly. I have a book about Nigeria called The Culture of Corruption, nonfiction. So this is the world we live in. And how can we figure out from looking at this world? This is cross-sectional data. This is data we would just observe. How can we figure out if it's the norms or the legal enforcement that can help us out? It's pretty hard. Maybe they reinforce each other. They're both going on. And this is where diplomatic immunity helps. So with diplomatic immunity, now all of a sudden, whether you're Norwegian, oh gosh, I picked Norway. Jonas is sitting here. He's like, yes, we're wonderful. I meant Sweden, not Norway. Nothing to do with Norway. Denmark. Is that okay? Okay. So now all of a sudden, whether you're a Norwegian diplomat or Nigerian, there's low legal enforcement. You can break the law. You can park wherever you want. You don't have to pay the ticket. There's no more legal enforcement. And the question is, do the Norwegian diplomats or the Nigerian diplomats in New York get more parking tickets? Is it their social norms, their cultural norms, some psychic cost of breaking the rules that constrains them, or the threat of punishment that constrains them? Now, after 2002, legal enforcement changed for both sets of diplomats, and now they're both in a high enforcement equilibrium. So it's an interesting case. We can observe the countries in cross-section, then we can observe diplomats in a low enforcement case and a high enforcement case, and see what all these things do for parking violations. Okay, let me pause and see if there's any questions. Yeah. I was thinking of it as cultural norms around controlling corruption. So sort of, maybe I should have used like weak norms about containing corruption versus stronger norms about controlling corruption. Maybe that would be clear to use. Yeah, I can see why it's confusing because high might refer to high corruption, but I meant high sort of control of corruption. Sorry about that. Yeah. That's a great question. We can't really with this data. All we can do is get a snapshot of this one type of government official. We can't necessarily generalize other types of government officials. We can't generalize necessarily the population as a whole. And that's the limitation here is we only have this particular slice of government officials. Now they're all kind of sent to do the same job. They all look similar. They're all pretty educated. They're all sort of pretty high-level diplomats in their country's foreign service. But there's no reason why they're necessarily representative of the country as a whole. I think that's fair to say. Yeah, same question. Yeah. So we're going to have a neat natural experiment with a subgroup. That's kind of interesting because government officials are interesting when we talk about corruption, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the same norms apply outside the government service. Yeah. There's many diplomats from most of these countries. In fact, we're only going to focus on countries with at least 5 diplomats, which eliminates a few smaller, island nations and smaller missions. Some have dozens of diplomats. So yeah. We do have some, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We can't fully explain all that, but I'll talk a little bit about that. We have some outliers within certain countries. Martin? I mean, it's interesting you say that. I'm not going to show the regressions here, but in the original paper we do have a bunch of religion controls and other things. There is some kind of interesting stuff going on with religion. I think I'll get to it. When I get to the time pattern of results, right around 9/11, there's some very divergent patterns of parking tickets by diplomats from Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries, which is kind of interesting. I'll come to that if I have time. It's also in the chapter. Okay, so what data do we have? We were lucky. The United Nations keeps a list of all the people working at these UN missions in New York. So we have a complete list. They update it every year, people's names, full names, etc. And so we know the number of diplomats per country. We also have the number of diplomatic vehicles per country. That we only had for 1 year, but apparently it was pretty stable over time. So that's sort of like to control for the number of vehicles or number of staff. So we can do that. What we got from New York City, as I mentioned, was all this data on diplomatic parking violations, and we got all the raw data. We know exactly who the vehicle was registered to, the license plate, date and time, type of violations. So a lot of violations were parking in a loading zone or parking in a driveway. There was also a lot of double parking, overstayed meters, pretty much all the, these guys were expert parking violators. Where exactly it was located. So we had the exact address of the violation, the fine. So basically, you get a certain fine was $70. If you don't pay for a month, it increases, and then it gets up to $110 at this period of time. And we know what country they're from. Yeah. That's a great question. I think it's on my last slide here. And there's an interesting theoretical issue around that, which is there's sort of U.S. norms, which we would say are most people aren't getting parking tickets in New York, so the norm is to sort of follow the parking rules. And then there might be this other set of norms you come with. Let's say you come from a high corruption government service. The question is, which way do you sort of move? Do you kind of converge to the US norm or not? And I think on the last slide I'll get to that. But that's a great question. And we do have data over time, so we can talk about the evolution of the violations. Yeah. So let me show you. We've X'd out the names of people on the left there. Those are registered to particular diplomats. Others belong to the mission. It's about half-half. So you can actually see it could be one or the other. So in some cases, where it's the mission, we can't pin it down to an individual. When it's a particular individual, and we have the blue books, we know exactly when they arrive and when they leave, and so we can kind of see the evolution of violations for a subset of our data. But this was just literally the first sheet in the spreadsheet, 1997, the time, double parking, loading zone, what the location was, the fine, and you can start seeing some of the countries that are getting busted. And this gets me to my next clicker question, which is I'm going to show you a list of the 18 countries with the most diplomatic parking tickets over this period, per diplomat, no, per capita. How many of those 18 are in sub-Saharan Africa? So I want to get your guys' kind of guesstimate on that. Okay, so we see a range. 11 is the right answer, so a lot. And here is the list, and you can see, oh, sorry, let me just get this off here. There's basically a lot of Middle Eastern countries and Sub-Saharan African countries on this list. So those are the countries, that's the number of violations per diplomat pre-enforcement. This is post-enforcement. The first thing you'll see here is post-enforcement, there weren't too many violations anymore. So the enforcement really worked. The number of diplomats, and then we have a corruption index from these investor and expert surveys, where positive numbers above zero mean above average corruption, negative numbers mean less. And the African countries now are highlighted, including Nigeria there, which is the country I sort of focused on. And you can just see that there's a lot of kind of this corruption or abuse of power among African diplomats in New York. And again, a bunch of Middle Eastern countries. The worst offender is Kuwait, 246 violations per diplomat per year. And you have to try hard to do this. So this is saying every single diplomat was getting more than one a day on average. So it's sort of like, it's Friday, I've only had 4 violations this week. I don't know if they had like a betting pool. I'm not sure what they were doing. But they were getting a lot of violations. The Egyptians were trying, though. They didn't quite make it. They got pretty close. Chad, Sudan. Oh, Bulgaria and Albania are there, too. So 2 Eastern European countries. The worst offender in the whole database was one ambassador from Kuwait, and not ambassador, staff member from Kuwait, and we call him Ambassador X. And we actually mapped out his violations. And the guy was just amazing. I mean, near the UN, it's like every single parking spot he parked in illegally. He had his favorite spots, for sure. But, basically, that's work-related. So you might think, this guy was, poor guy, he just was parking near work. He was probably really busy. He was rushing to all these important meetings. But, he was also, getting parking violations. A bunch of these were on Friday, Saturday night in Greenwich Village. He was up on the Upper West Side near some really good bars. So we're thinking that probably a lot of this wasn't just work-related. Yeah, rather. We looked at that. We looked at that in the original paper. We break down sort of like, it wasn't even 9 to 5, maybe 8 to 6 violations or 9 to 5 violations within half a mile of the UN as basically probably work-related, and then everything else is probably not work-related. And you see the same patterns for work-related and non-work-related. So it wasn't like they were totally different patterns. It was the same offenders basically for both. A lot were around work on working hours, for sure. But, it's an abuse of power because, other diplomats are buying parking spots or they're taking the subway, God forbid. So, yeah. Yeah, so we get asked that. There's so much publicity in New York during this period about the diplomats on the news, and their cars were just getting these stacks of tickets every day saying parking violation. And so I think our feeling is they had a pretty good sense of what they were doing. Yeah. Yeah, that was per person. All those numbers I showed you were the 246 was per diplomat for Kuwait. Okay, this guy was getting like 500 violations a year or something like that. This guy was just, like pathological. Like we needed to do an intervention with this guy. Like it wasn't normal. We had the names of all these people. We've been really, when our paper first came out, there was a lot of media attention, and a couple, emails and phone calls from some of the embassies in New York, kind of like, so what are you planning to do with this? We're like, don't worry, we're not going to bust you or anything. Yeah, but they had a lot of money, so they could actually pay the tickets from Kuwait. I mean, I think that's the thing. But in some ways, yeah, it's just a total flaunting of rules, right? Like, you're not surprised by this. Oh, okay. Take him to Sierra Leone for the ABC. Okay. So what about no unpaid violations? What about the countries in the whole period did not have a single unpaid violation per diplomat? These are the countries there. I'm not going to talk about the Scandinavian countries. They're already happy enough with themselves. We see the UK there, Netherlands, Australia, Japan. There's some countries you might not expect. There's some Middle Eastern countries here, Turkey, Israel, etc. Turkey and Israel are both countries that in an earlier period had tons of parking violations. They looked more like the other Middle Eastern countries. And of course, they're both extremely strong allies of the US, very dependent on the US for aid and military support, etc. And after all the media uproar I think it was in the 80s, basically those embassies cracked down on their own diplomats. So there were cases of embassies, even without legal enforcement. There was no New York legal enforcement trying to really change the norm among themselves. There's also some countries like United Arab Emirates, Oman, that get tons of tickets, but then pay all of them. So they basically get almost as many as the Kuwaitis, but then they'll pay 100,000 a year or something of parking tickets or whatever it is because they don't care. So it's interesting. Different countries have different approaches. What you will see here is these countries almost all have negative corruption scores, less than average corruption. So it turns out there's this very strong link between corruption as measured through other data and corruption as measured through the parking tickets. And that's one of the patterns in the data, or in the paper, is that relationship. Yeah. They have different numbers of diplomats and cars, but well, here it's all zero. So no matter how you whatever the denominator is, there's basically zero. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. A couple of them got like 1 ticket or something like that. And I think there, I'm not sure exactly why. These are basically like getting a ticket that went unpaid. I think what ended up happening is after the enforcement started, people here just started looking like everybody else in New York, where like, yeah, they basically paid their tickets, so they tried to avoid getting tickets, but maybe every once in a while they forgot, or something like that. But the total rates are extremely low here. In the previous table, even in the post-enforcement period, there would still be some unpaid tickets. Okay, so again, there were these 2 periods, low enforcement and high enforcement. And as I mentioned, but basically before October 2002, there was no enforcement. Afterwards, they threatened to pull plates from countries that had a lot of fines, unpaid fines. And what they basically did to show everybody they were serious is in October 2002, they just stripped plates from 30 countries. And that got everybody's attention. They gave the plates back, but nobody was getting parking tickets. Let me show you the time plan. I'll come back to this issue of sort of religion in a sec. what you can see is before the 9/11 attacks, there were 3,000 to 4,000 tickets a month by diplomats. So that's just unpaid tickets per month. Just so like tens of thousands of tickets per year. I mean, just tons of tickets. It was very stable. Right around 9/11, it basically drops and it stays a bit lower. People were staying indoors. There was a tremendous police presence. So maybe that's why there were fewer tickets. But in this period, diplomats from majority Muslim countries had an incredibly sharp drop in parking tickets relative to other countries. And I think part of the reason there was there was a very strong anti-Muslim backlash in New York and the rest of the country after the 9/11 attacks. Diplomats from predominantly Muslim countries were afraid, hesitant, didn't want to sort of, piss off the police or upset others. So there was this big change. Now, it starts kind of going a little bit back to normal a few months later until the crackdown in October, November 2002. And after that, you're really just at a level sort of an order of magnitude less parking tickets. Now there's only 100 a month unpaid diplomatic parking tickets, which isn't that big a deal. Isn't that different than maybe citizens of New York in general? So that's one interesting thing. Another thing I'll say is we got opinion survey data, just popular opinion from populations, on how pro-American attitudes were in a subset of these countries. The degree of pro-Americanism in popular attitudes predicts parking tickets incredibly strongly. In pro-American countries, controlling for everything else, region, income level, etc., countries with pro-American opinions have many fewer parking tickets in New York, their diplomats. Countries with very strongly anti-American public opinion have many more tickets. So it's very interesting, and it says something about norms and attitudes shaping behavior in the absence of legal enforcement. I'm talking about the pre-enforcement period. So in the absence of legal enforcement, social norms, attitudes, maybe some feeling of legitimacy. Maybe if you're from a very pro-American country or government that's aligned with the US, people didn't want to break the rules because they basically felt like, hey, the rules here are fair. Maybe in anti-American countries where there were historical grievances against the US, etc., they sort of felt like, hey, I don't need to respect the rules here. The US didn't treat me or my country well. I see no reason to put myself, go out of my way to follow the rules here. So attitudes and norms were clearly very important. And again, I mentioned how African countries are among the worst violators. We also saw how tickets fell by like 98% after 2002. This is just a plot of the data country by country. And it's a little bit hard to see all the country codes. I've highlighted Norway and Nigeria again. But what you can basically see is among the low corruption countries on the international surveys, tons of them basically just have no violations. And among the high corruption countries over here, lots of them have lots of variation. But there's a lot of variability. Even among the high corruption countries, in many cases, they don't have many violations. In others, they have lots. So these other attitudinal issues or other factors were still quite important. But in some ways, our data does line up with what's expected. So within a lot of European data, Italy comes across as the most corrupt country in Europe, or one of the most corrupt countries. They're also the European country with the most parking violations in the pre-enforcement period. In fact, part of the reason this paper got a lot of international media attention is every country wanted to see where their diplomats were ranked. So the Brazilians were really upset, oh, our diplomats are the most corrupt in Latin America. The Estonians were very proud that among the 3 Baltic countries, they had the fewest violations. We're the cleanest country in the Baltics. There were really articles like this. So everybody saw this as a lens into the behavior of their government officials. I think I'm out of time, so we'll continue next time. What's that? Which country?